Thank you to everyone who made it tonight. You're all in for a real treat. I don't know who here has had a chance yet to read Everything's Horrible and Wonderful, but I finished it earlier this week, and there's a lot of books that try to tackle grief, which is inherently not a very funny subject, and especially less funny when the person who's passed away was themselves extremely funny. And yet, in this book here by Stephanie Wittels Wachs, we find a way that grief really becomes this portal through which we get this incredible look at who Harris Wittels was. For those who may not know, he was a writer on the television show Parks and Rec, as well as Eastbound and Down, frequent podcast guest on shows like Comedy Bang Bang. But just insanely funny in a way that's almost hard to quantify. And Stephanie has managed to do it, which is no small task. It's a book about what it's like to actually go through something, basically covering both the year after losing Harris and all the life that came before it. So we're extremely grateful to have her here with us tonight, and please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Stephanie Wittels Wachs.
That was such a nice introduction. You probably could hear me without it, but I'll be formal. Okay. How is everyone doing? Thank you for being here. Okay, so do you people know Harris? Is this why you're here? Anybody familiar with who Harris was? Anybody never heard that guy's name ever? Great. Okay, so I'll give you a quick rundown. That was a great introduction. You got a sense of it, but he was a comedian who was discovered at 22 by Sarah Silverman, put on her show. From there, he went on to work on Parks and Recreation. Anyone seen Parks and Recreation? He played the animal control guy on that show. Harris was his name. He invented the word humble brag. So there's a book over there called Humble Brag that he wrote. They've put both of our books next to each other, which I took a picture of for my mom because she'll like that. So really weird guy, bizarre sense of humor. This is why the table is Jamaican themed with string cheese. It's in honor of him. And it was a tremendous loss for not just my family when he passed, but for the world. Anyone who follows comedy, the outpouring of support and devastation was intense. You expect that when you grieve, you're going to be doing that privately. But another aspect of this was that we did it publicly because everyone was really sad about it collectively. So I wrote this book. He passed away in February of 2015. And I wrote the book starting in May of 2015 through a year after he passed, which was, the yard site was February of 2016. So he passed away a day before my birthday. Which, like, you couldn't write, you know. Like, if you were going to do a fiction, you would say, a little too on the nose, you know, but it was all true. And let's see how to describe it. I really thought that I was going to just not be able to go on anymore. I just felt like I couldn't move through the world anymore. As I had been, because I was very close to my brother. He was my best friend. It was just the two of us. And I was overcome with all of the worst, darkest things you don't want to ever feel at the same time. And I didn't know how to get out of it. I also had a 1-year-old at the time, which was a really strange juxtaposition to be having this beautiful baby who was discovering the world and loving her new life. And, you know, when you're around a baby, and they see like a cloud, it's just the most fantastic thing they've ever seen. And so, you know, I was trying to be present for her, but also dealing with this crippling grief. So I started writing it down. And it didn't make me feel better, because nothing was really able to do that, but it did make me feel like I could continue to move through the world. So it became this survival exercise. And in addition to just trying to survive, it also became a way for me to make sense of something that was really senseless. I think that when anybody goes through a tragedy that doesn't make sense, there's a need to investigate it, or to figure out why it happened or how it happened, and could we have prevented it, and did I do everything I could have done, and did he do everything he could have done? And there was a lot of questions that were unanswered. I talked to a friend recently who was telling me about her mother who passed recently, and they called her and said, okay, you know, she's going to go soon, and you need to come home and be with her. And I thought, that's so lovely that you got to have that time. You know, when somebody's taken from you suddenly, you don't have that moment to talk to them and to say all the things that you want to say to somebody you're going to see for the last time. So the book is directed to him. I speak to him in the book, because once he was gone, all I wanted to do was to talk to him. And even to this day, when I write about my brother, for some reason I always direct it to him. So I'd like to read you a little bit, if that's okay. The chapter where my mom and I go to the Emmys. It was a crazy time. So I'll read a little bit. Parks and Recreation was nominated for an Emmy the year after he died. And since he was a co-executive producer on the show, he got to go. And NBC, who is wonderful and has been so great through this entire thing, invited my mom to come. And she was really excited about it. I was not at all excited about it. And so there was a little conflict there. So that's kind of the beginning of the chapter. Just a little backstory about Harris really quick, to give you an idea of who he was as a person, and as my people say, the chutzpah that he had, which means the balls is really what it means. He had no shame, no fear, no filter. It was very strange. It was like almost a defect that a person could just not ever feel that thing that we all feel before we say something ridiculous. So, did anybody catch Seth Meyers on Monday? Did anybody see it? Okay. Well, you saw this then. So I was invited on Seth Meyers on Monday, which was also a totally bizarre experience. But we read this, and I'd like to share it with you guys before I read the section on the Emmys. There was a sexual harassment email that was sent out to all the employees of Parks and Recreation and NBC that talked about a workplace harassment mandatory meeting. Very serious subject. Once again, sent out by executives, top people at NBC, all the people who have hiring power and firing power. So the subject is NBC mandatory workplace harassment meeting. A brief reminder that we all have to attend a mandatory NBC workplace harassment seminar this Friday, July 22nd at 8 a.m. here at the Lot. It will be downstairs in the basement multi-purpose room number 1. There will be bagels and coffee. Thanks. Pretty standard email. My brother replied all of them. Will the bagels be shaped like pussy holes? So, just a little anecdote. He didn't get fired. Somehow he didn't get fired. I had the pleasure of sitting next to his boss recently at a dinner, Mike Schur, who is the showrunner of The Office and Parks and The Good Place, all the great shows that we all love. And I said, I really just have a legitimate question, like, how did he keep his job over the years? Because he would also come to work an hour late. I mean, he was terrible at things that all of us seem to be able to do. And Mike just said, because he was funny. Like, that was it. He got away with everything because he was so funny. So anyway, just set the scene for Harris and before we begin. Okay. Just a warning that I use a lot of profanity in my writing. So if that offends you, goodbye. Okay. Chapter 18, 7 months. You always said you'd take Mom to the Emmys someday, and here we are, she and I standing in a large dressing room with cheap maroon carpet, staring into a mirror draped in gowns strewn with beads and sparkles and rhinestones. I've never worn a gown like this. It's so heavy. I imagine I'll have to wear shapewear. I hate shapewear. I hate you for putting me in this position. This is not how any of us imagined this would play out. In the future fantasy scenario, Mom is your date. You'd strut the red carpet together, hobnobbing with celebs as she clung proudly to your arm. You'd thank her in your acceptance speech as the camera panned over to her, dabbing her wet eyes with a tissue. Dad and I would proudly watch it all unfold on TV back in Houston. I would be wearing an elastic waistband, not a gown. In 3 weeks, Mom and I are going to the Emmys without you. Parks and Recreation is nominated for Best Comedy Series, and you will be honored in the In Memoriam segment. An invite showed up in Mom's inbox late August. She forwarded it to me with the overly exuberant message, "Please go with me!" Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. There's about 15 of them. She still composes emails in Comic Sans, which just adds to my frustration about the entire ordeal. I was at work. I audibly grumbled. There was no way to get out of this. The timing is terrible. My students just got back from summer break. We just moved into our new house a week ago. There are so many tchotchkes to shelve. I don't want to leave my family for 3 days. I don't want to take a day off work. I don't want to fly to Los Angeles ever again. I don't want to go to an award ceremony in honor of my dead brother. Once again, why can't Dad go? Why can't he play the part of supportive husband? It's landed on my desk since you died, and I never applied for the job. I explain all of my reasons to Mom, but end the email saying I'll go if it's really important to her. As you know, she brings that out in people. It's really important to me! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Again with the fucking exclamation marks. It's too much punctuation with which to argue. We book the tickets and buy the gowns. I go with the one that has zero beading but plenty of flair. The top is silver and shiny like a fashionable suit of armor. The bottom part is a floor-length chiffon skirt with big silver and white horizontal stripes. Describing it makes it sound hideous, but it was quite beautiful. The only thing I've ever worn that comes close to this level of formality was my wedding dress. Mom goes for a white Monique Lhuillier beaded gown. I assume she'll have to pay extra for luggage. It's so fucking heavy. The day before we leave for LA, Mom gets an email from Universal inviting us to an NBC pre-party on Saturday night. As much as I don't want to go to the Emmys, I really don't want to go to this. None of this feels like a party. Plus, you hated these sorts of things. Mom, of course, feels otherwise and wants to see famous people. She also feels it necessary to remind me several times to pack my dress and my shoes like I'm a fucking 5-year-old. My frustration with her is reaching levels only experienced as an angsty teen living under the same roof. She is genuinely excited about the weekend. It is off-putting. She seems to have lost sight of the fact that we are going because you died. We're walking to the gate at the airport on Saturday afternoon when she says, "I am just so excited that you finally get a little vacation. You never get to relax. She's from Mississippi, by the way, so she does talk like that. The invisible tape that I've put over my mouth out of respect for our grieving mother finally rips off. Mom, we're going to the Emmys because Harris died. Nothing about this is relaxing. I don't even want to go. She's stunned. Silence steals the space between us. We wait for the plane in silence, board the plane in silence, take off in silence. I can tell that she is genuinely hurt and throwing a silent temper tantrum of epic proportions. I recognize in this moment what my therapist was describing in our last session. My mother has conflated our emotional experiences. If she wants to go to the Emmys, I want to go to the Emmys. If she feels excited, I feel excited. This must be some residue of emotional grief. Soon the flight attendant rolls by to take drink orders. I order a white wine, crack open the top, pour it in a plastic cup, take a big sip, and turn to Mom. So are you going to ignore me the rest of the trip? I just feel very guilty right now, she says in her delicate southern drawl. I forced you to come with me, and you don't want to be here. You didn't force me. It's just so hard to leave the baby. It's a lot for Mike. I know. I feel terrible. And now I feel terrible. Mom, it's fine. I wanted to be here for you. Am I not allowed to be honest about how I feel? It goes back and forth like this for several minutes. She playing the I feel so guilty card, and I the I want to be here. It's fine one. Finally, I finish the wine and beg, can we just move past this and try to have a good time this weekend? I don't have the energy to argue about it anymore. She agrees, and we move on. Renting a car and driving from LAX is very familiar. We've done it dozens of times, but the fact that the car isn't headed to your house in Los Feliz guts me. It's exactly why I didn't want to come here. The hotel is downtown, right across the street from the venue, and all the streets are shut down for blocks in preparation for the event. When we check in, they hand us a fat envelope with our itinerary and tickets to both the award ceremony and the governor's ball. The tickets are gilded and beautiful. This is another world. We check in and get dressed for the pre-party. It feels wrong driving up to the party in a rental Altima. There are paparazzi hovering outside. We walk up a short flight of stairs to long folding tables where the staff is checking people in. Our names are crossed off the list and we head past security into the party. It is painfully loud. The music is pulsing and deafening. I have to shout to communicate with Mom, who is standing directly in front of me. It's also hard to find anywhere to sit or stand. The place is packed with beautiful people in beautiful clothing who are schmoozing, kissing cheeks, and throwing their heads back in laughter. I have to turn sideways and squeeze in between people in their conversations to get from point A to point B. Point B is the sushi bar, where two men are preparing fresh hand rolls. I'm starving and would love a fresh hand roll. I grab a cocktail off a tray and make my way into the line. After the sushi bar, we squeeze over to the raw bar that's overflowing with shrimp, oysters, and crab legs. I note how much you would love the food here, but likely hate the party overall. This is not your scene. You would be the only one in a hoodie. I turn to Mom and say, no wonder he became a drug addict. The end. Funny stuff, right? So there's more of that. That's actually, I chose that because it's, I think, the lightest chapter. Would you agree? One of the lighter ones. I didn't want to just like weep openly in front of all you guys. I have some dignity left, just a little. So, do you guys have any questions about anything? Is there anything you're curious about? Yeah.
I wonder how your parents played into like what you decided to put in the book and like when they first saw it. I know some of it was on Medium, so it wasn't all like one big surprise, but
yeah.
How did you navigate that?
So my parents, I always say like we kind of grew up like in a quasi orphanage, but like we all, we like all lived in the same house. They lived downstairs, we lived upstairs. They were super nice to us, very supportive, always had the pantry stocked, but, you know, like, very free. Not a ton of boundaries or limits, things like that normal people seem to have with their children. The thing that they did really well, superbly well, is that they always encouraged us artistically. Always. So, I mean, I think they put me in my first theater class at 3, you know, something crazy. And so my writing the book was something that was always supported. It wasn't ever, I was scared that it might be poorly received. But it's interesting, when I finally sent it to my mom to read it, she thought she looked great in the book. I was like, did you read the chapter on the Emmys? But, so I thought, well, maybe I have portrayed her honestly if she thinks that she looked good. That was, you know, my dad I didn't think was going to read it at all, because he has not wanted to really deal with any of this. But the other day, very late in the game, once it was already like this, which is very late in the game, I had a bunch of them on my kitchen table, and he picked it up and was like, why didn't you give me one of these, you know? Take it. And he read it in 2 days, and also had nothing but positive things to say. So, you know, everyone was, I don't think I look great in the book either. I think we all look pretty terrible. I think we all look flawed, as human beings are, except maybe for my husband Mike, who I think looks the best, and then the baby. The dog looks good. But yeah, everyone seemed to understand that it wasn't, you know, it was something that needed to be out there, and dealt with it well. Yeah.
I have a two-parter.
Oh gosh.
Okay. The first part is, I'm pretty sure Harris wrote a screenplay about like guys who used to be in the music festivals, and then they went back to like reclaim their youth, but they found out it wasn't like Woodstock, it's now like Coachella and stuff, and they had a hard time relating. Was that screenplay finished, or?
Oh yeah, that was like one of the. So this is what that one was finished, and it went really far. I think that one was actually one of the Scott Rudin projects that he had in development, that he wrote with his friend Armin, who was his comedy partner. He had this really great, you know, gold standard career, and everything seemed to happen really easily. But there were several scripts like that he spent years working on that could have essentially just been thrown in a fireplace, you know, that just never saw the light of day. So it was finished. I think I have a copy in a file cabinet, but it was never greenlit. He had another one about a guy who lived in his mom's basement, and then this one went really far. His little brother, who was like 13, 14, boy genius, started a company called Cone Tips, which were the chocolatey bottoms of a drumstick ice cream cone. And he made like, you know, that was Harris's favorite dessert. So it really, yeah, they are good. I don't know if you've ever had them, but they are really the best part. That script went really far too. And then it was like, you know, crying shame. Yeah. How do you know about that?
I just listened to podcasts or something.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, he did a lot.
Second question, besides fish, what other like influences do you know that he like looked towards if he was ever feeling like down about his own work, or maybe like a better way to phrase it is like what kind of like got him into doing comedy?
Louis C.K.
Oh, okay.
There's a part of me that's glad he's not here to see all of this. I mean, that was truly his idol. We went to see him. My parents used to take us to see all of the comedians that we were too young to see. There was a great comedy club in Houston where we grew up called the Laugh Stop. And we saw Mitch Hedberg there, we saw Louis there, we saw Pauly Shore there, we saw, I mean, any awesome comic you can imagine would come through, and when Harris was 12 or 13, we went. He went up to Louis after his set when he was 13 and gave him notes on how he could have been better. And then, you know, cut to like 10 years later and he's opening for him on tour. But that was really his idol, biggest idol. He also loved Hedberg, who is also not with us anymore. So, comedy, not always that funny. There's something sad there. Yeah. Wait, was that?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, that was 2 parts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of have 2 questions too. One, did you ever want to get involved with comedy? Okay.
I mean, I'm naturally funny. No, we have a joke in my house, like who's the funny one, and I always win that battle. But I did stand up one time at the Comedy Cellar in New York, and then I was done. I was like, that was the most horrible 5 minutes I've ever spent, plus the days leading up to it. I don't know how people do this. And Harris used to like throw up before sets constantly. When he was just starting, he would like, it would be like this. Bleh. Hey guys, I mean, it was like this reflex. I mean, that kind of, oh, no.
Okay.
What was the second part?
The second question was, like, as you got deeper into the book, what kind of fears did you have? Like, you know, were there any things popping up that made you kind of want to stop, and did you just feel like you had to keep going? How did that work?
That's a really good question. When the reason that the whole book even exists is because my daughter slept in the car only. She only slept in the car. She was a real jerk as a baby. And I would have to drive her around, and then she would fall asleep, and then I would be stuck in the car for like 3 hours. And that's how I started writing. I started writing thoughts down on my iPhone. And my husband suggested that I transfer that to a Medium article, which I did. But before that was published, I was really afraid of putting it out there. I mean, terrified, gripped. Like I just felt, I have felt this entire time that I don't ever want to dishonor my brother. I think he's the greatest person in the world ever who lived, so I would never want to make him look bad. But he was a heroin addict, and that makes you look bad. And then he died. So I mean that's what happened, you know. So I remember showing that to my husband and being like, is this terrible? I mean, is the writing terrible? Is all of it terrible? It's terrible, right? It's just a terrible thing, and it shouldn't go anywhere, and I should just, you know, delete it. He was like, no, it's not. Just do it, you know? And so that fear continued, for sure. And then, like, it is very personal. There's a lot in there that I didn't really second guess until I started seeing people holding the book. And then I was like, oh, that is a lot of personal things that you're holding. It's like somebody holding your diary, you know? But when I was writing it, I didn't have an end thing in mind. I wasn't like, this is going to be a book that's going to be published, and then I'm going to be in San Francisco talking about it. I didn't think that. I just was like, I need to do this to keep going. And it wasn't until it got closer to being a reality that it started to feel more frightening. Yeah.
Can you talk about his addiction? Like how long he had it, if you knew about it, if other people did he ever go to recovery?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the book, there's 2 narratives in the book. One of them is the year after. One of them is the 2 years before. So I found out that he was a drug addict 3 days before my wedding, actually. He called to tell me that. And for about a year, he was taking pills. It's a very common story, very ununique. He had a back problem and he was prescribed OxyContin and he got addicted to it. It's like, that's the story. I knew that he was a recreational drug user. Somebody talked about fish. He followed them around the country. So, he always did that, but it was never a problem. So once he sort of said it was a problem, it took about a year of him trying to convince himself and us that he was fine to do it on his own. I don't know if anyone here has loved an addict before, I'm sure, because statistically you definitely have. But there's a cycle that starts up where the addict is like, I've got it under control, and you want to believe them, and then they clearly don't, and there's a lot of back and forth there. Once he finally went to rehab, it was about a year after that. So he went to 3 rehabs, 30-day programs, which I am convinced do not work. My only frame of reference is my personal experience, which was his. I mean, I have no degree or authority to say that, but it didn't really work for him. He started using heroin after the first rehab, and then he went to 2 more after that. And sadly, it's very Greek tragedy, this whole story. He was cast on, sorry, let me back up. He was writing on Master of None, which was Aziz Ansari's Netflix show. Have you guys seen that show? He wrote on the first season. I can really hear his voice very clearly in the first season. He was cast as Aziz's best friend, which is the role that Eric Wareheim ended up playing, which was a really significant role on the show. And he had to audition for himself. The character was named Harris. He wrote the character, but then it was just this funny thing where he had to audition for it. And so that produced a ton of anxiety. But he ended up getting the role about a week before he died. And he was going to move to New York in 2 weeks. And didn't make it. So the addiction cycle was horrific. It was, I don't want to say worse than the grief, but it was its own kind of hell. If anyone's ever loved an addict, I just think it's the worst thing. Because if you're not addicted, you're like, but you're so smart and funny and like you're this brilliant person and you're so charming and together and successful. Why can't you just not use drugs? It just seems so clear to me. Just don't use drugs. Or go to rehab, it's fixed, and then don't use drugs. But it's just not that easy. So I've learned a lot more about addiction, obviously, through all of this. But yeah.
Losing somebody close always, that sounds like the horrible part. I was wondering what the wonderful part is.
That's a really good question. The baby part was really wonderful. I have a great daughter. She is 4 now. She is just the most fantastic person, I just really like her. She was born, actually, we really had a doozy of a few years. She was born with a hearing loss, which was a permanent condition. We found out about it when she was 2 weeks old. And I was really worried that she would never speak, that she would never be able to be mainstreamed in school, that her life was going to be really terrible. But we listened to all the people that, told us what to do. We got her hearing aids when she was 5 weeks old. She started speech therapy at 5 weeks old, which is like, what does a baby do in speech therapy? I was like, what are you gonna do with her? But now she's 4, and at 3 we tested her speech. She was on a 6-year-old speech level of a hearing child. She never stops talking. She told us in the car the other day that we damaged her. I don't even know where she knew, we learned that word. I'm damaged because of you guys, she said. So she, there was like this crazy thing that birth and death happened right on top of each other. And I was like pulled very intensely in both of these directions. And what I realized over the course of writing the book is that there are these moments that become more and more as you go on in the grief where you will see a rainbow, and you'll be struck by the beauty of that in a more profound way than I ever was before my brother died. Things that are beautiful mean more now. I don't know how to explain that, but I think it's because you're looking for signs and you're looking for things to kind of pull you out. And so I just started to look at the world closer. I looked at the sky a lot more. I listened a lot more. I just noticed more things that had beauty in them. So that's kind of the wonderful part. And the fact that we were able to keep going. Like, I didn't die. I'm here still. And I also talk about at the end of the book, when something like that happens, it feels like a bomb is just sort of dropped on your house and everything explodes and you have nothing left and you're just sort of in rubble, just sitting on boards and nails and dust and you sit there for a while and it's really uncomfortable and cold and exposed to weather, and one day you have to get up and rebuild something. And so you end up like taking stock of stuff that was wrong maybe before. So my life now is just totally different than before. And I feel like I'm living more authentically now than I was because I have this understanding now that it can end really soon. Like we're here really for a short time. So stuff that used to matter and feel really big just doesn't feel as big anymore. That's the wonderful part. And I'm also pregnant again. So, I not only am I living, I'm reproducing. We're having a boy this time too, so that's a good thing. We're excited about. Yeah, that's a good question. I also, like on my birthday, a year after he died, had a very strange experience of. I have great friends who said to me, we're going to go to this Tiki Bar that we were supposed to go to the year before when Harris died. And you don't have to come. We don't need to see you. But if you want to come, we're going to be there. You don't need to. But we're going. And I begrudgingly went, and I was like, I'm not going to have any fun. But then I went and I had fun. Like I ended up just, in spite of myself, making jokes, having a drink in a seashell, whatever you have at tiki bars. And I remember at the end of the night being a little tipsy and saying to my husband, I want to live, And it just kind of like knocked me out. And I just thought, oh, okay, like I can keep going. I don't have to stay in this dark place. So, yeah. Fun stuff. Yeah.
Did you decide on the title pretty early on? Because I know in the book that's something that he had said, or a paraphrase of that. I think it's when you went on a family trip.
It's a tweet.
It's a tweet. It was a tweet that he did.
This great tweet. Anybody ever seen Harris's Twitter?
Oh yeah.
It's a sight to behold. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. At Wittels. A lot of them are in his book Humble Brag that's for sale over there. He's not going to get any royalties, so I'm just telling you for your own enjoyment. No one's profiting here. But there's a lot of great tweets in that book. But one of the best ones he ever said was, let's stop finding a new witch of the week and burning them at the stake. We're all horrible and wonderful and figuring it out. And that's my favorite thing he ever said. And I think that speaks to so much. And I think it speaks to Harris. He was wonderful, but also horrible in a lot of ways, and flawed like everybody. And he struggled with this terrible disease. I was at this event last night in LA, and one of his friends told me this story about him where it was his birthday, it was Jim's birthday, and he wanted to go to this burger place for his birthday. And Harris had eaten there for lunch. So he was like, I don't want to go there because I ate there for lunch. So how about I take $100 and I donate it to a charity of your choice, and then we can all go to Chili's in Encino instead. And Jim was like, this is my birthday. And Harris was like, but I'll donate $100 to charity. Like, you're not going to take that deal? And so then they all ended up going to Chili's in Encino for Jim's birthday because Harris was a terrible person in a lot of ways. So I feel like it really sums him up as well. Yeah, I love that story though. Somebody asked last night, is there anything you wish you would have put in there? And I'm like, I wish I would have put that story in there. I wish I would have known that and put it in. It's a really good one.